Let's learn in this video how to create a basic CI/CD pipeline in Azure DevOps in order to deploy an application into a Kubernetes cluster. This pipeline will start first by creating the Docker image, tagging that image, and then pushing that image into a container registry. And then it will finish by deploying the YAML manifest files into the Kubernetes cluster. Let's see how that works. The source code of this application along with the YAML manifest and the pipelines are available on this GitHub repository, so you can go and check it out. What I have done here is that I've cloned or I have imported that code into my Azure DevOps into the code section, because we can do that here. We can have a Git repository. So here I have imported all of these files. So from here you can see in the folder number 9 the pipeline that I'll show today, and also you can view the application source code, which is the app.net, which is .NET Core application that have a Docker file defined from here that will be used to generate the Docker image. And then inside the folder number 2 for Kubernetes AKS, from here you can find the YAML manifest file that will go to deploy later into our Kubernetes cluster. And from here I have access to my AKS cluster, which is Kubernetes and Azure, and then I have here access to my container registry, which is using ACR, and you can see some of the images that I was using during the testing of this application. So now that I have the pipeline already defined from here inside my Git repo, I can go to import that file. So I can go to pipelines, and from this page I can go to create a new pipeline. And then I select Azure repo Git, or if I'm still using GitHub, you can import it from GitHub directly. So I go to select Azure DevOps repo, and from here I go to select to say I want to use an existing Azure pipelines, and then I'll choose from the YAML files inside my application, and I know that my pipeline is defined inside the folder number 9. So I'll use the 01 Azure pipelines for getting started. And then I can go to import it. I have already done this step, and here I can see my pipeline defined in Azure DevOps. And let me start by explaining the content of this pipeline. So first here I select the trigger to say I want to trigger this pipeline each time I have a new commit or a pull request into my main branch, and then the pull, that's the build image on which this pipeline will run all of its scripts. So this will run on the latest Ubuntu server version defined in Azure DevOps. And then I define here some variables that I'll use later in my pipeline. That's going to be the tag for my image. So each time I run this pipeline, I want to generate a new image, and I want to give a new tag for that image. So here I can specify whatever policy or whatever strategy I want to use for my tags. For this demo, I'm using a prefixed tag, and then I'm pending to it the build ID, which will be incremented each time I run this pipeline. And then here comes the important steps for this basic pipeline. So remember, this is still very, very basic pipeline just to build the image and then deploy it into a Kubernetes cluster. In a later video, follow me next to view a more complete pipeline to add more other tasks into it. So let's keep it simple for now. So here in this task, I'm using the Azure CLI tool in order to run some Docker commands. So what I want to use here is that I want to create the Docker image. So for that, I'm running the command docker build, and then I'm tagging my image, and here I'm using the name of my ACR server. Then I'm pending the tag. And because my app is inside this folder, so I'm specifying that here. And then next I will go to login to my ACR, to my Azure Container Registry. And I can do this here because here, not in this task, actually I'm already connected to my Azure subscription using this service principal. So I have created this service principal in my Azure DevOps organization, and then this will give me access to my Azure subscription. Behind the scenes, this is actually a service principal that have the contributor role for my resource groups. And that will allow me to connect to my ACR just by running the command acr login-n and then the name of my ACR. After that, I'll go to use the command docker push, and this will push that image into my ACR. After that, in my YAML files for my application, actually, if you take a look back at the app deploy, here I want to upgrade, or I want to update actually this new tag. So each time I deploy the application, I want to put here the right tag, the new tag that will be generated in each build. So here I need to update this value. So what I'm doing here is that I'm defining a tag with the double underscore, and then tag here, that's going to be the name of the variable that I've defined in Azure DevOps. So that's the tag right here that mentions, that's a reference to the tag right here. So this task, which call it replace tokens, this task will take care of that config. So it will look for any tag that have a variable defined in my pipeline, and then it will replace it. So that means it will replace this tag with the right tag that was generated by this variable here. And here, of course, I mentioned the app deploy YAML because I want to search only inside that file. And then I run here some small script just to view the content of this new YAML to make sure that a replacement was done successfully. And then last step here, the most interesting one, is the deployment, the actual deployment to my cluster. So here I'm connecting to my AKS cluster, and note here how I'm using this task called kubectl. And using that, I'm connecting to my Azure subscription using that service principal I've previously created. And then here I'm connecting to my AKS cluster. I'm mentioning its resource group, it's the cluster name, and then I want to deploy to the default namespace. Probably here you want to change that, not to deploy to default, but to another namespace. And then I want to deploy some configuration. I don't want to run command line, but I want to deploy some YAML manifest files. For that, I use configuration, file path, and then the path for my folder, which contains my YAML files. And remember, that was the folder number 2 for me, AKS Kubernetes AKS. So I'm mentioning that name right there. And then I run the command apply, so that will run behind the scenes kubectl apply -f, then the name of this folder, and as a result, it will deploy all the YAML files from there. Let's see now how this works in real world. So I'll go to my pipelines, and here is a sample execution. So here first we'll go to first of all, it will go to provision a build agent, and then it will go to download the application source code. Then it will go to build and push the Docker image. So first it will connect to my Azure subscription using the command az login -- service principal, and then mentioning the service principal credentials. So here it's actually connecting as a service principal from my pipeline. So we never use our own personal credentials there. And then it will go to run the command docker build. So with running the command docker build from here, that will go to run the Docker file. So the build agent will run that Docker file, trying to run all the steps for my application, trying to create that Docker image. And here it was tagged with this new tag, and then the image will be pushed into my ACR, into my container registry. And then at the end, it tells me that your image is now successfully pushed. So that new tag is 5718. Let me check in my ACR if I have that tag. If I go back to my repositories, and then yes, here it is, that latest image that was pushed there. Next, we'll go to replace the tag. So here it tells me, yes, replace it to tokens and the files. And if I do cat with the name of that file, then yes, I find that here, that image and that tag was replaced successfully. So now it's using 5718. And then last step is to deploy the YAML file into my Kubernetes cluster. So again, it will connect to my Azure subscription, and then it will go to run the command kubectl apply -n, the namespace default, and then -f, and then it will mention the name of my folder. And here I get as output a JSON file for the files that were deployed to my cluster. And at the end, it will go to clean up that build agent. Great. So again, this was a basic CI/CD pipeline for building and deploying an application into a Kubernetes cluster. Follow me next to view a more complete pipeline. See you.